Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach. September 7th. And here is the situation in America. It looks like this election is going to come down to the Catholic vote. That's what a lot of people are saying. In all of the presidential elections in recent memory, the winner has gotten the majority of Roman Catholics in America. And that's where we come in. Today, we want to discuss some of these issues that are facing Catholics when it comes to how we should be voting. Yes, there is a how to Catholic voting. And we want to also debunk some of the arguments that are coming from the left, most of which sound, pretty good on the surface. But upon further analysis, they're false arguments and they fall apart. And to discuss this situation and also get into the culture war in general, which is what we do at the front line with Joe and Joe, we are pleased and honored to be joined by Timothy J. Gordon. Now, I don't imagine that our audience or Tim needs an introduction for our audience, but having said that, just very briefly, Timothy J. Gordon studied philosophy in pontifical graduate universities in Europe. He taught philosophy at Southern California community colleges and then went on to law school. He holds degrees in literature, history, philosophy, law. He's happily married, and he is the father of 6 children. Tim does a popular bi-weekly podcast, and he's also the author of Catholic Republic, all right? And we suggest that everyone go out and buy this book. So when this country gets its head on straight, maybe they'll follow some of the ideas that are in this book. And he co-authored with his brother Dave, Rules for Retrogrades, okay? Another important book, and we're gonna get into a couple of the rules in the course of the conversation. And it's Rules for Retrogrades, 40 Tactics to Defeat the Radical Left. Tim Gordon, welcome to the front line with Joe and Joe.
What's up, Joe and Joe? Thanks a million for having me. Which slight correction on Catholic Republic. It's maybe when the country gets its head on straight, it already acknowledges the ideas it's already operated when it actually worked, America, on those crypto Catholic ideas. Maybe when it gets its head on straight, it will acknowledge that it has operated on those crypto Catholic ideas. That's Catholic Republic. But yeah, thanks a million for throwing a shout out to that book. And man, I'm happy to be here with you, brothers.
Yeah, we're gonna get into it later in the conversation where we're gonna talk about the difference between fellowships and coalitions. Right. And I think it's a very, very important topic to get into. But I do want to kick it over to Joe. Mr. Resinello, if you would.
Yeah, it's our custom, Tim. We always start with a prayer, and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes of the conversation. So in the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, amen. Amen. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, and never was it known that anyone who sought your help or sought your intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, we fly unto you, a Virgin of Virgins, our Mother. To you we come, before you we stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not our petitions, but in your clemency hear and answer us. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. So I guess, Tim, a good place to start is basically at the sexual revolution in the 1960s. Where I come from in New Jersey, a lot of Italian, a lot of Irish, they were Catholic, obviously, and they were Democrats. They worked, blue collar jobs, the path, which is the train system. They worked in the factories. They came over, they raised kids. Since the sexual revolution, obviously, a lot of these Catholics are leaving the Democratic Party because they've left the principles of that party. If you ask me, the last real true Democrat was probably the governor of Pennsylvania, Bob Casey. Who gave a very famous speech at Notre Dame talking about how the Democrats abandoned their principles when they embraced abortion upon demand. Sadly, though, a lot of Democrats who are Catholics still vote the party line. To point to some evidence on that is Hillary Clinton in 2016, 46% of the American Catholics voted for her. I'd like to get your take on that. How is that possible? Is it a formation issue? Is it these are just old time folks and they just continue to keep doing what they always do? Are their hearts changed? Are their hearts not changed? What do you think is the driving force behind that?
Excellent question. and it's sort of the question of questions with regard to American Catholics, not simply for its import with regard to electoral politics, quite important, but because it's emblematic, talismanic, whatever you want to call it, for why are at least half of Catholics, like, I don't know what words we can use here, like silly and at best, and at worst evil in not only their votes writ large, but more broadly what they're willing to support. And I always see the electoral number is over half most years. Hillary was a little different. She's kind of an open witch over against typical Democrat Party candidates. So she got a slightly lower number of the Catholic vote. Normally it's over half of American Catholics support death. So just let any year's general election Democrat Party candidate represent death, okay? And more than half the Catholics will vote for it. Here's the problem. There's so many ways to analyze it, but we have this bimodal structure of the Roman Rite. So you guys probably didn't think I was going to go here, but it's what I've been thinking about most lately, and there are 10 different ways to answer this question. I think this is the problem. We have this two modes of the Roman Rite. You know, there are like 19 rites in the church if we count all of them, the ways you can say the liturgy. Only one of them in the history of the church has had two modes, right? An extraordinary form, the Tridentine Latin Mass Catholics. I'm associated with traditionalism there. And then the ordinary form since late 1969, the Novus Ordo. What's happened, irrespective of the design, because we're probably not going to do Vatican II here, whether or not it was good, bad, whatever, defensible at all, and Vigano and all that, irrespective of why it happened that most Catholics that go to the ordinary form are badly formed, misinformed, and basically supporting the popular culture. Now, that's where you get pretty much all of the 55% that support death. You get like none of that support for death of the party of death from the Tridentine Latin Massers, who are a small section of the population anyway. So it's not 50-50 numerically, but the point is, because there's only one rite that's bimodal in its structure, and I mean, if you ask someone like me, I'm going to say clearly you're getting the right values, the formation that's supposed to come from a liturgy. It's supposed to also form us. It's supposed to be evangelical. It's a great prayer. It's, where we receive the source and summit of the faith, the Eucharist. When there's clearly one that's more holy than another, then it's creating two classes, neither of which are good. Basically the people who go to the Latin Mass, how can they form anything other than pride? Because a lot of these people, even the great Father Chad Ripperger said, the Latin Mass is clearly the holier, but the pride of its goers are often going to block any graces, signal graces that might come from it. And then you have the mainstream Mass, which 98% of the time that the Novus Ordo is said, and 97 and 98% of the places, it's just cheerleading for the world. Well, there's not a lot of good that's coming culturally from the people that go to the Tridentine Mass, because one, they too often they become swollen with pride, and two, they're kind of like the Calvinist elect that are apart from the world. They want to be neither in the world nor of it, whereas their cohorts who attend the Novus Ordo most often are kind of wanting to be both in the world and of it. Neither of them are hitting the nail on the head. We're supposed to be in the world, not acting like Quakers who are set apart, in the woods of whatever, Pennsylvania. We're supposed to be in the world, but we're not supposed to be of it. And neither party, even the conservative leaning trads, the people that are still going to the Tridentine Latin Mass, acting as if, Sacrosanctum Concilium never happened. Whatever, that's good. I belong more there than to the other group. But they are not doing any evangelical work in the popular culture. And also they're turning off through a kind of snobbery that developed to the Novus Ordo people. They're not evangelizing the Novus Ordo people, saying, hey, come, we love you guys. Come on, why don't you try this? Or even if you stick at the Novus Ordo, why don't we show you some important liturgical conventions? So I think that's what's happened, is the devil has used the fact that the Latin Mass and everything else that was changed, modified, reversed, subverted during the time of Vatican II, whether or not it comes from the documents, different topic. The devil is so smart that his intelligence is superhuman, that he knows how to even use the resistance in the church against itself. Mm-hmm. And so there's basically been very little real cultural pushback against the party of death, the culture of death. The people that kind of know, they keep the secrets to themselves. The bigger church in general, the Novus Ordo church, as the trads call it, which isn't quite accurate to say it that way, but the people who go to the Novus Ordo, they're just bathing in it. I mean, they're just being marinated in culture worship every day, even when they go every Sunday, when they go to Mass. Mm-hmm. So there's no pushback, even from the so-called trad. There's no meaningful cultural pushback, even from the tradition.
You know, it's funny because I had, like, not to the extent that you experienced it, because I knew your troubles at your old job. I obviously read about them. But I was thrown out of teaching RCIA because I taught it according to the catechism. I've experienced, not to the degree, and I'm not comparing it because you're a father of 6. I was single. But I taught the catechism according to the 1992 book. The way I'm very clear. It was a Novus Ordo church, but I taught it because it was written, and that's the way I look at it. I'm a compliance guy by trade, just so you know. I know you're a legal person. I work in that setting. It says it, so you do it. Right. And this is how I taught it, and I was asked to leave as well. So, I mean, I think you're right. The culture, many of the people who go to that, you know, basically brand, or however you want to phrase it, you know, the flavor, they are in the world. They don't take their faith seriously, or as serious as they should. I'll tell you this though, because I mean, I'll be honest with you, Tim. I mean, I'm a very common guy. My dad was a barber. We weren't like rich people. My mom was a secretary, and we just went to church. My parents believed, you know, in the church, but we just went to church in the town, and I went to Catholic school, but it wasn't a fancy one. And I'll tell you this, you know, a lot of people who go to those churches, if you go to the daily Mass, you will find people who take their faith very serious. But however, as a larger whole, in the communities that Joe and I grew up with, Italian, Irish, Polish, my neighbor's from Warsaw, right next to me. My other neighbor is from the Eastern Europe, old Czech, you know, Republic. They don't take their faith seriously. And they're sure not going to be guided by it to vote. And this is sad. I think it has everything to do with the heart. You know, we have to have a conversion of heart. That comes through prayer. It comes through confession. It also comes from adoration. You know, the things you talked about, and I listen, you know, to you, and I've listened to, you know, people who go to the Latin Mass. They're clearly smart, many of them very intelligent. They have a lot of things to say, but I agree with what you said. There's something in the heart, you know, that has to change. And I believe, because Christ is Christ. And if we sit before him and we're honest in our confessions, the grace will come. Right. And we will be the light in this world. And also what you talked about made me think about 2 books that I read. One by the Benedict option. What the heck was the general?
Rod Dreher.
Dreher. And then I read Give Unto Caesar, which was Archbishop Chaput. Right. And he basically indirectly refutes that book. He says, we're supposed to be in the world. We're not supposed to separate. We are the leaven. Right where we are in my little town in New Jersey, where you are in Mississippi, where Joe is in New Jersey, where we work. And that is also an issue. People don't have examples. You know, we could do like, it's like we could do everything right and say everything right, but do everything wrong. And people aren't seeing it.
Well, let me ask you this, Joe, and Tim, let me ask you this. To what extent in the Novus Ordo do you yes, place the blame at the foot of the pastors of these parishes who are, let's give credit to the laity. If they're not hearing it, I think that's a major problem. Then, if you're not hearing something, then you're not going to change. And we found in my wife and I in our travels, a lot of times again, I hate to say it like this, but watered down homilies. It's all about Jesus loves you and don't worry about anything. Nobody's talking about moral issues that confront us. Certainly nobody's talking about gay marriage, but they barely even mention abortion. What do you think about that? How much is the clergy to blame for this?
Well, if you're asking me, here's the kind of overview. I've taken what I'll do from time to time is needfully, I think, correct according to my own view, and no one's 100% certain. Nothing's certain in life aside from the love of a mother or whatever you will. But I'll needfully correct from time to time my own listenership, viewership. I was more associated with Catholic traditionalism this time of the year last year when I was on Dr. Taylor Marshall's channel, TNT, Taylor and Tim. And my views haven't evolved. It was just more that a ball got rolling, largely because of that show that me and Marshall did. It was a sensation, Taylor and Tim. A ball got rolling, and what happens with the masses, the people that are out there consuming products, just how the human race works, is they take something not too far, not a principle that you're trying to exposit popularly, where you're condensing complex ideas and making it more simple. It's not that they took anything I ever said too far. It's that they took it at first in the right direction, but quickly got off course. And so the question of questions really is, why are more cultural graces not flowing from the Latin Mass? The fact that it's been preserved, and it's a small portion, but it's a lot of people go to it. And so the important answer is that, okay, there's something with the bimodality of the Latin. One has to win out. I happen to think that the Latin Mass should just be the one that wins out. And we tried this. It drove everyone from church. So that's what I think there. One has to win out, and you're only developing pride in the Latin Mass communities by allowing them to be the secret elect with the clearly better liturgy. Mm-hmm. I think we need to universalize it, go back, and then all of a sudden they won't be the like a dog with its bone, the little elect being able to be better than everyone else, and then you'll get the averaging force of the popular culture the church would have to return to the world. That's what I think would happen if you forced the Latin Mass back. But as to your question, who is responsible for it? I've defended Vatican II's sacred constitutions and taken no small share of flack for it, and that's fine. I don't care. That's what I am. I'm throw all your darts at me. I'll be the Catholic bad boy. I'll be the traditionalist that says, whoa, we can't go this far. I mean, we can't unilaterally condemn an ecumenical council, even if it was a very troubled one, even if it's clearly the most troubled one. So I've defended. The documents have to be good for what they are, ordinary magisterium. And it's not up to us to say, well, it happened during the 60s and there were a lot of evil prelates running it. I don't like it. It's not up to us. The constitutions are what they are. They're part of the ordinary magisterium, and we have to accept them with submission. But no, when it comes to why are 99% of the Novus Ordo masses done not according to the rubrics, not according at least to Sacrosanctum Concilium, the Vatican II document on how the new Mass would be done. Imagine being a teacher of a middle school classroom, and at 2:57 on the dot, all the kids in the room do a binder drop. right? To say that it's individual pastors, apart from a kind of conspiracy of either silence or conspiracy proper, an over email that went out to instruct all of them, what you would be saying if you believed this, that it's the individual pastors and they just happen to have made up novelties to the Novus Ordo, exactly like 99% of the other pastors in America. And they do it the exact same way, holding hands at the Our Father, you know, getting a table instead of an altar, and turning your back on God during the real point of the formal point of the Mass, the consecration. The awful songs, all of the abuses, they all happen in the exact same way. Well, that would be as foolish as believing that all your students just accidentally happen to knock their binder on the floor at exactly 2:57 with no collusion.
It's a good point. It's a good point. I mean, clearly we are at a point in the church where there's trouble. I mean, how that came about, I mean, you know, obviously there's people who have a lot of theories, but there's trouble. I mean, you know, you have clerics who do the right thing, and frankly, their voice isn't really celebrated, which is sad.
Well, look at you're talking about the Novus Ordo and the traditional Latin Mass. Father Rutler in New York, he doesn't know, he celebrates the Novus Ordo Mass. Okay, that parish is packed on Sunday. Yeah. What's that, a mistake? You can't see. It's an example where you can't say, if you're hearing the truth from the pulpit, and obviously you're getting that from Father Rutler. Okay, well then the people will come. If there's a thirst to hear more deeper homilies, maybe a little harder to hear some of the hard teachings of the church, people will come. People want to hear it.
See, I think it's I think it's hearts. You see, because I was affiliated before I was married heavily with the Missionaries of Charity, and they have a Novus Ordo Mass. If you ever go to Mass with the sisters, and it's piously said. And if a priest comes in and says Mass with them and doesn't do what they're supposed to do, they will very clearly say, "You're not welcome to say Mass here anymore." I personally believe this is just wherever you go to Mass, it's the heart. You see, you said something I think that's very key, submission. You see, all of us, like we're just people, right? And God is God, and he has authority. And the Blessed Mother teaches us to be obedient. And that doesn't mean we listen to something that's wrong. Like if something's written and it says X and you do Y, then listen, you're doing what's wrong. But I always say, and when I've taught in the little circles that I've taught, is the church is perfect. The people in it aren't, but it's perfectly laid out. All we have to do is paint by numbers as people. And it's our hearts that have to change. And the only way our hearts change, at least in my experience, is I've been knocked down in life, and then when I've been knocked down, I basically, through humility, accepted my mistakes and basically looked to God and opened my heart, and I'm honest with him. I think there is some pride on both sides of the fence. People conform to the world, and in conforming to the world, we lose God. We lose God. We lose the grace. And sadly, when you see this 46% who are voting for Hillary or voting for Joe Biden, they're not willing to bend their knee. You see, getting into heaven, the way I've always taught it is this. If I come to your house, Tim, and you have a white carpet on the ground, you have every right to say to me, Joe, you got to take your shoes off before you come in my house. If I say no, you have every right to say to me, Joe, you can't come in the house. Well, that's heaven. Like God, the way I look at it, it's his house. I got to do what he says. I don't think we have that. I think people, and those who capture it, whether they go to either Mass, capture God. They find him in their heart because they're willing, like the Blessed Mother. Let it be done to me according to your word. Saint Joseph, leave this city, go to Egypt, done. No argument. I'm doing it. We don't have that.
Well, speaking of obedience, because, and again, I don't want to sound too judgmental, but just quickly to pivot back to politics for a second, when you look at, let's say, Biden, AOC, who we've recently been told is the future of the Catholic Church. Tim, I'm sure you saw that article. Joe and I covered that article on the front line with Joe and Joe. I don't want to listen. It's kind of midday. I'm not in the mood for the vein to pop out of my head thinking about that article. But when we talk about disobedience, okay, get into, if you would, Tim, a question that a lot of people are asking right now. And you have Father Imperato out there who's being very vocal. He's a friend of the show. He's being very vocal. He's saying it is not morally licit to vote for any of these characters, Hillary, AOC, Biden. Talk about that a little bit, Tim, if you don't mind.
Well, there's a 2004 Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith document put out by Cardinal Ratzinger, less than a year before he became Pope, on whether or not a Catholic is allowed to vote for a politician who is pro-abortion and pro-euthanasia. And he distinguishes quite specifically between those two options, possibilities, voting for a pro-abortion or pro-euthanasia politician, which is categorically not allowed, with a caveat I'll get to it in a second, whereas voting for a politician who is seen as a war hawk or what's the other one, pro-death penalty politician, is a matter of prudence, meaning because the death penalty and war are not intrinsic evils, they can be conditional goods, death penalty and war. The church is not going to adjudicate that matter, but so it distinguishes. It says, no, you can't vote for a politician who is pro-abortion or pro-euthanasia because they're pro-abortion or pro-euthanasia. So you get into complex moral theology because there's that little caveat. You're not allowed to vote for them because they're pro-abortion or pro-euthanasia. So then what Catholic Democrats have responded since 2004 is, okay, I'm a lifelong Democrat, meaning they're pro-abortion, pro-euthanasia, because that's like pro-abortion is the center stage of the DNC. But I'm a lifelong Democrat. Okay, I'm going to keep voting Democrat, but I'm no longer going to vote for the Democrats because of their pro-abortion position, you see. And they attempt to parse that then you get into complex moral theology because Benedict included that because clause at the end. There's language at the very end of the document that pitches the analysis back the other way, that does throw into question whether or not you can vote for a pro-abortion politician who's running against an anti-abortion politician, like we have pretty much most years in the general election. Whether you can ever do that plausibly or even feasibly, you can pull it off and not be doing it with the intent of voting for abortion. I mean, I think all Benedict Ratzinger meant with his because caveat, you can't vote for a pro-abortion politician because they're pro-abortion. What he meant to say is, okay, well, you don't have to be disenfranchised if you have, Rudy Giuliani or one of the kind of soft on abortion Republican politicians running against a typical Democrat who's pro-abortion. Then you're still allowed to vote. Just vote for the one who's less pro-abortion. That's why I think he used that clause. And most American Democrats who are Catholic have abused it. The ones that even care halfway enough to look at a 2004 CDF document or know what the CDF is, they say, oh, okay, fine, so I'm not going to vote for this politician because they're pro-abortion. I would say that's intentionally impossible. You know who you're voting for. If you vote for the Democrat Party now or really anytime recently, I mean, you guys are softer on the early Democrat Party than I am. I'd say, look, they're the party of slavery, segregation, and the party of FDR, right? The party of really, really first big step towards socializing America. I'd say they weren't good even before they entered the culture war. But now it's just so obvious. You're voting for abortion if you vote for a Democrat. You just can't do it. I've made 3 or 4 shows in the last 3 or 4 months saying you just can't vote for a Democrat. You can sit out the election. You don't have to vote. But if you're going to vote, you basically have to vote for someone other than the pro-abortion politician.
Yeah,
it's amazing
100%.
to me. It's like we talk all the time on the show, Tim, about the 22 million Democrats for life out there who have been pleading. Kristen Day from the Democrats for Life have been pleading with the party leadership, Tom Perez in particular, which Joe and I say on the show all the time. The party, you're voting for Biden, you're voting for Obama and Tom Perez. That's what you're doing. Is that they've told these people, leave the party. They've told them that. It's not even like they've implied it. They've told them, well, you're not welcome in the Democrat Party. Okay.
Right.
They pitched them at the DNC. Okay. To moderate their language a little bit in the platform. Just moderate the language. You know they're not going to change what their intentions are, but moderate the language. They were told to kick rocks. Okay. Along the lines of what you just said, how can anybody look at this party and think in their mind they're out for anything other than abortion on demand right up until the moment of birth? And you must, if you vote, here's my point, you must agree with us on that. You're voting for us, that's what we're going to do. And I think that's where the moral problem comes in for the person who's even thinking about voting Democrat. They're telling you there are no restrictions on baby killing. They're telling you that, and you're still willing to go ahead and vote for them. I don't get it.
Agreed.
Well, I think the abortion issue comes down, this is something we've said on our show a number of times, it's sex. People use sex as a recreational activity, whether they're Catholic or not, whether they believe in God or not. And they're not willing to put that down. So you're Catholic, you go to church, but I'm having sex outside of marriage. And what happens if I get some girl that I meet at a bar pregnant? I'm not going to sacrifice my life or my money or my free time to have this child. So get rid of it. At the root of it, it's that, I think. Or, you have a daughter and you're afraid, I have a daughter, you're afraid that if she got pregnant, she's going to quote unquote ruin her life. She's just learning. She's in college. She's experimenting, whatever you want to call it. The root of abortion comes from that, in my view. And people, again, are not willing to change. Christ, what did he tell us? Change, convert. What did John the Baptist say? Repent and believe in the gospel. Before you can follow God, you got to repent and you got to say your way works and mine doesn't. Society's not willing to do that. I learned that the hard way. I learned that at 22 years old. My way doesn't work. I'll scream that from the rooftop. It simply doesn't. Yeah. And mankind hasn't come to that point. And the culture when it comes to abortion is, I'm not going to change. I'm not going to change. Talk a little bit about the seamless garment argument, because that kind of brings this into it a little bit, Tim. Like where they equate abortion with other social justice issues. They bucket them. So basically, like you said, the death penalty versus, abortion or euthanasia.
Or the environment.
Or cloning or the environment. And basically, because I hear that all the time. And I'm sure you do too. I mean, you're no different than us. You probably have all types of friends. I have religious friends. I have non-religious friends. I mean, I've had many chapters in my life. People I went to Catholic school with. I went to a Catholic college. I mean, it's not Franciscan. I went to a Jesuit college. And I have friends that are very successful.
And you survived. You went to a Jesuit college and survived.
But they're Catholic.
Hell of a thing.
Yeah.
But I'm really, yes, Joe, I'm glad you're asking this question. Tim, please, there are, I would say, very popular and in some cases strong arguments, or what seemingly are strong arguments. Take apart the seamless, well, if you would, Tim, tell people what it is, tell our audience what it is, and take it apart a little bit. Break it down and why the seamless garment argument is false.
Well, we're three householders, right? The head of three separate families. It would be like seamless garment. You're getting up on a Monday morning and going to work. And as you're kissing your wife lovingly goodbye, you say, hey, I'd like for you to get these two things done today, whatever they are, have these two things done. Right? That's okay. That resets the agenda for the day. That's what Pope Benedict's 2004 letter did, as when he was prefect for the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, as the number 2 in the church. He said, look, these are the 2 things that matter with voting, right? Abortion and euthanasia. And they're not actually like me, the head of a household, giving my wife, hey, please focus on these 2 things on a Monday morning. Those are 2 surprise things. Whereas abortion and euthanasia, the church militant already knew that those are no-nos, but he was reaffirming. So imagine you say, do these 2 things, right? The most clever manner of disobedience for your wife who's like, I don't want to do these 2 things, right? I was given orders. Here are the marching orders for the day. Here are the 2 things. I don't want to outright look like I'm disobeying. So let me just say, I'll call my husband an hour later when he's at work and be like, well, I also have these other 10 things, right? That I'm going to add these to the list, and I'm going to kind of randomize them. I'm going to, so now it's 12 things. And yeah, I'm not saying I won't get to your 2 things that you as the head of the household said, these are the 2 things. But so that there's a chance I'll get to them, but I added my own 10 things and I randomized that list, and I'll let you know, if I only have time to do, let's say 3 things today, it's your items are 2/12. So that's a 1 in 6 chance times 3. So there's actually a 3 out of 6, a 1 out of 2 chance I'll get to what you did, but I haven't disobeyed. I'm just doing my own things. It would be like you is, actually, the priest of the household is what a father is called, the priest of the church in miniature, or the ecclesiola. You're the church, and you're like, no, okay, that's fine. That's a clever little parlor trick, right? But no, I'm clarifying now, an hour later over the phone. I don't care about the other 10 things. Please, definitely do those 2, right? So that's what the church keeps saying to the culture of death. It doesn't say it that loud. It doesn't say it as clearly as probably the husband on the phone from work would be saying it. But the church has more or less said clearly, like, no, okay, you're trying that. You're trying this back road to obedience, which is all the seamless garment is. It just says, here are these 10 other items. They're all lefty talking points and lefty action items politically and culturally. And they just say, yeah, we'll fit it in. We'll fit in pro-life if and when we can with these other 10 things. And hey, then when they inevitably leave those 2 items off the list, which they're planning to do, they'll just say, oh, well, those 2 items were important to us, but there are 2 among 12, and we couldn't get to all 12 in one thing. Look at Father James Martin's DNC prayer, where he shoved a non-reference to abortion, an insinuation of abortion. He never mentioned abortion. Everyone was, tearing at their garments, giving him praise, all the moderate conservatives in the Catholic Church. Oh, he said unborn babies in the womb. That's what lefties do all the time. They pray that they don't come out with, chromosomal issues. He didn't pray for all the slaughtered ones that haven't been baptized yet and therefore went to limbo, that were slaughtered by abortion. And he didn't designate, okay, it's the mothers who are killing their babies, the most unnatural, heinous crime in the world today, a mother killing her own baby, an act of murder by a murderer. He didn't clarify any of that. And even if he had said abortion more clearly as one of the things being prayed for and against, he stuck it right in the middle. The rest were all Democrat action items. So what do you say at that point? You say, no, don't do the other 10. Just do these 2, because I know what you're trying to do. And now I'm clarifying. Yes, this doesn't qualify as disobedience yet. You tried something there. I saw it. It was a seamless garment move. Do those 2 items. Do them first. Do whatever else on that list of 10 you see fit with the rest of your day. But not all issues are of equal weight, and I don't give necessarily 2 things that matter every day. Well, we do have these 2 issues, abortion and euthanasia, that matter every election, and you don't get to jumble them up in order to overlook doing them or abnegate our duties with regard to them. That's the seamless garment.
You're talking about like authority, and you're talking about obedience clearly, and why your wife would do those 2 things is because she trusts you and loves you. I mean, that's how I would look at that. She loves you and you love her, and you have her interests at heart because you are the head of the household and you love her, and she loves you and she trusts you. You see, but that's where we as a people of God fail, because when we don't listen to the church, which is our mother, and she tells us something, as you just said, what we're saying to God is, I don't trust you. I trust me. I trust me. And that's where we go wrong. I can remember a nun told me this. She said this to me. She wanted me, they do Little Shepherd program, the Missionaries of Charity. She wanted me to find someone to build a little like altar, so the kids, the program, something like a carpentry job. So I said to her, sister, let me think about it. I'll see what I can do. This is what she says to me. Joe, don't think, pray and do. Same sister, a little down the road, she goes to me, when the bell rings, it's the voice of God. You drop everything,
right,
and you go and pray. You see, that's what we've lost, because we, as a people, there's hubris. We somehow think we know better. We know better than God. We know better than the church. And God says, no, you don't. No, you don't. I made you, and I know what's best for you. Just like you with your wife. Honey, do these two things because I love you. And you love me and you trust me. So it works. You see, we as a people have, like, again, it comes down to humility. What was Our Lady? Our Lady, if she was anything, she was humble. Humility is the beginning of all the virtues. We as a people, a Catholic people, have to just listen. How many times, I have 4 children, Tim, under 6. If I tell you how many times I say, listen, listen to me, listen to me, listen to me, I'll never tell you anything that will hurt you, because I love you. You see, we as a people don't believe that. We say we do. Oh, we believe God. We trust God. Do we? Do we?
Well, that's
and
one
I
of
say
the.
that to my daughter all the time. Daddy, I love you. Love is not a word, Teresa. Love is an action. If you love me, you'll show me you love me. That's what we don't do as a people. And those who do it and do it well, they have ST in front of their name. They become a saint. We have to listen to God. I'll tell you another crazy.
Can I respond?
Sure. I'm sorry, I'm ranting.
Yeah, there are different reasons for disobedience, though, right? There are two parts of the human will, right? There's the intellect and of the human soul. There's the intellect and the will. And the intellect, if it's a trust issue, an epistemic issue, that is sometimes the reason that people disobey. That's sometimes the reason the soldier disobeys his superior. But there are also will issues where no, I know what some soldiers say. No, I know what my superior is telling me is for the greater good of the army. I know it's not rash. It doesn't put me at needless risk. I know he's actually a good commanding officer, but in my will, I just don't want to do it. Right. And so the primeval instance of disobedience is, I think, the far more common. By primeval, I mean non serviam, by the devil. He understands what God's doing, and he understands that this is, he trusts the common good. The devil, Lucifer, knew enough of what God stood for to know he wanted to oppose it, and he wanted to work toward the opposite of the ens commune, or the common good. So there are will reasons for disobedience, and there are inelective, voluntary reasons for disobedience, and inelective reasons. And a lot of, so when it comes down to whether we're talking Democrats or the age of feminism, which is really at the heart of all of this. My 3rd book's coming out in 3 months, and it's called No Christian Feminism. I think a lot of the culture war reduces to feminism. I don't want to be reductionist, but most of these acts of household disobedience, church disobedience, whether it's bishops, priests, or lay people not obeying the Holy Roman Church, the documents of the Holy Roman Church, disobedient children or wives in household, we essentially have anarchy running around, or a matriarchy de facto is what's essentially running society. It's perverse. I think more often than trust issues, which are There are plenty of those too. But I think more often it's a voluntary issue. It's no, non serviam. I do not want to do that. So, and it's a mix, but except there are lots of reasons for people not doing it. But it's, to me, this at the end of the day, last point here, in this great connection I'm making, in this large connection I'm trying to draw, Democrats who vote pro-abortion, I don't think it's a trust issue. I don't think it's an intellectual issue. I think everyone now understands that's a little baby in there. Remember in the 70s and early 80s, they would say, oh, people just don't know. They think it's a clump of cells. Now everyone knows, well, I'm just a clump of cells, and that's a little baby. It's an act of will. It's not just trust or intellect. What do you say to that?
Let me ask you this, and thank you for addressing the seamless garment argument, because again, that's a popular one. You hear it a lot, just in everyday conversation. Well, worry about this issue alongside abortion and euthanasia. Right. Talk about another one, if you would. And this one you probably hear in the last 50 years since Roe versus Wade more than any. Unfortunately, it was popularized by Roman Catholics like Mario Cuomo. I'm personally opposed to abortion, but I don't have the right to impose my values on others. Now, someone who has degrees in both philosophy and law, okay, please explain to the audience, Tim, the nature of the law, if you would. In other words, how necessarily the law imposes, okay, and how that whole argument is completely false.
Where to begin? The basis for the Western civilization's law of the land comes from chapter 26. This concept of law of the land comes from chapter 26 of the Magna Carta. You know, almost 1,000-year-old document that was the basis for the US Constitution, for the British Constitution, for everything that followed. And it's a Catholic document, right? It was signed, it was ratified by a Catholic bishop. Magna Carta is one of the probably the least secret as to why all of these constitutions that were ratified by the English Whigs in England and America, even though they were Protestant, they were reading 500 years back to this Catholic document, Magna Carta, the blessed work. And the Magna Carta conceptualizes what things that even Thomas Aquinas and well before him, Aristotle, knew ahead of the Magna Carta. Specifically, that the main point of the common law is the common good. And of course, so you want to legislate virtue at some level, but more than anything, what you want to preserve is people's life, liberty, and property so that they can work out with their prudential reasoning, their phronesis, how to achieve the good life, eudaimonia, whatever else. So the way this enters the abortion discussion is that the most fundamental role for law is to protect us from each other, or from encroachments of one another's life, liberty, property. So it would be true, maybe, on at least an arguable sort of libertarian versus conservative, semi-reasonable debate, that a woman has the right to her body, depending on whether you tend more conservative or more libertarian, both can be argued for. If, when an abortion was performed, you know, the mother died, but then you'd be in the realm of euthanasia anyway. If it's your body and you go get an abortion, then you die. This would be much less problematic. Now, the church still would say, well, this is basically an act of euthanasia. If an abortion meant this is a woman's body and the woman aborts herself. But of course, you know, so be that as it may. I'm partly just making a joke. The analysis is that anytime you take a human act, a moral act, and it results with your intention, concomitant acting, in the death of another person, in an unjustifiable homicide against an innocent human being, that is not, that violates Magna Carta and all of the precepts of Western law writ large. That is not you doing whatever you want to your own body. This is not something as academic as, you know, laws proposed that would keep you from doing things that are bad for you, right? Like pornography or whatever, even euthanasia. That's more conceptual. This is a mother Abortion, a mother who murders her young, fully, willingly, and all of that. So simply, it challenges pro-abortion arguments, challenge the very fundamentals of the reason for being of Western civilization and the laws of Western civilization to protect us from one another. And final point, that fetus, the little baby, is the most innocent. And the other presumption of Western civilization's basic legal structure is that the most innocent, the most defenseless, require the most legal protection. So it runs squarely against the entire structure of Western civilization.
I like the conversation that you had versus the trust versus the will. I liked it. And, you know, it made me think of something. I agree with you. It is about I will not serve. Because to not trust someone completely, you're basically, listen, I mean, none of us are saints. We're all sinners. We like to think we completely trust God. But if God, like Abraham, told me to kill my son, I don't know if I'd come through. I'm just being honest. Like using an exaggerated example. But here's the thing about the will. God has to break our will in order for us to give it to him, at least for men. Most men are not willing to give their will away, even to God. And a priest one time drew that in a homily, and I'll never forget it. He used the example of a shepherd. And if he has one sheep that always strays away from the 99, what the shepherd does is he takes the sheep and snaps its leg in his own hand, and the sheep cries. But then he binds the leg and carries it until it's healthy. And then that sheep will never again stray from the flock. Most men are like that. I was. I know better. I will not serve, whether I say it with my mouth or I say it with my actions. And that's what the culture is saying to God. I know better. But God will break our will because he loves us. You see, the shepherd snaps the leg of the sheep, not to torture the sheep, but to bring the sheep back into the fold. Our society is not willing to give its will up. But I believe because God loves us, there is going to come a time where he is going to break our will. And I think this country is experiencing, a little bit of that right now. As a kid, at least me speaking, I had to touch the stove. I didn't listen. You're seeing this, the fruit of a society that will not turn over its will.
Joe, let me ask you, let me just segue from that point into another question that I want to ask you, Tim, because I think it's important. Let's say, for argument's sake, we get back to some sort of normalcy in this country. And what I mean is you don't turn on the TV and see cities burning down, okay? But that's not good enough. That's not quite good enough. In your book, Catholic Republic, Why America Will Perish Without Rome, you argue that America could still be saved, but not by being the America that we necessarily have known for the last 200 years, but saved by embracing and applying Catholic principles that are the indispensable foundation of all successful republics. Talk about that a little bit, Tim.
Yeah, well, so, I mean, Montesquieu, who is the big hero of the ratifiers of the U.S. Constitution, of the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, who are debating whether or not to make the 13 states, which meant countries, which had existed from 1776 until 1787. For 11 years, there were 13 countries comprising what we would think of as America. When they were trying to ratify a constitution, it was to try to become one country. And there was 13 separate principalities which rebelled against the Brits across the pond. People tend to forget that. So they were all debating in Philadelphia in summer of 1787, and then in their own 13 states the following summer amongst themselves, the several states. whether or not to ratify the US Constitution, which would make them one. And I associate more with the anti-federalists that thought this is a little too centralizing constitution, a little too much energetic power from the center for the federal government. And they used the arguments of Montesquieu to say, well, let's adjust this constitution some so there's more local power. We call subsidiarity in the Roman Catholic Church. But I mean, the long and the short of it, the reason I brought it up is because Montesquieu had 3 cardinal rules. That republics must be small geographically. That's number 1, because they must be univocal. There's no such thing as a pluralistic republic, according to Montesquieu and all of the natural law thinkers, from Aristotle, Plato, to Cicero, to St. Augustine, St. Thomas, Suarez, Bellarmine, Juan de Mariana. Any of those guys in the classical tradition of republicanism, they all said a republic is a res publica. You have to have people with one religion and one moral framework, which united the people as the res publica, the heart of the republic. And therefore you have to keep it small. If you want to keep a club pure, we only want really, really big comic book readers that are 100% committed to reading this comic book. It's going to be a small club. So those are his first 2 rules. And then he has a 3rd rule, which has to do with more what we call federalism. It's not important. But so the idea of a continent-sized republic, which is what we have, right? From sea to shining sea, a continent-sized republic, is quite arguably a betrayal of the notion of 1787, the ratification of the writing and ratification of the Constitution. It's no surprise when you go back and you read these guys, as I did in law school, debating whether the 13 original colony/states were too big in their 13ness to be a classical republic, according to any of those thinkers I just named. And the anti-federalists were mostly convinced that that's too big. The whole eastern seaboard, or much of it without Florida, that's too big. That's not a republic. Republics are the size of West Virginia, traditionally, the size of England, size of Malta or the Greek city-states. So how are we going to do this without it becoming a centrally governed kind of immoral place, which is what America became. So that's one of the keys is balkanization. I think people have to get hip to the idea that it's unrealistic that 30 million, let alone 330 million human beings can comprise a meaningful res publica where they all agree about important principles. We have a divide in this country, where it's very roughly kind of a divisor of 2, right? Take the 330 million. That's pretty good that we have mostly people that are sympathetic toward Christianity, and it's not one sect of Christianity as probably a republic should be, but it's just Christianity writ large are mostly who we consider Republicans, rightly considered. And Democrats are mostly people that hate that Christianity is the center of Western civilization, and therefore they hate Western civilization. That's basically where it's gone. But even then, 167.5 million is too large for a republic. And that's because of the way that the natural law operates. America, even though it was founded by a bunch of Protestants, they were drawing against Protestantism, against the Enlightenment, which also sometimes makes a claim for being the headwaters of Americanism and American ideals. And it was really Catholic principles, the idea of life, liberty, property, natural rights that are uniquely Catholic. The idea of subsidiarity, or what we call federalism or local rule, that's a uniquely Catholic idea. The idea of virtue ethics. Specifically, all the founders and framers make mention of the fact that it doesn't matter how good a constitution we set before the American people. If they are a vicious or a licentious people, a good constitution will appear to them bad. To have a republic form of government, we need people that are virtuous and oriented toward liberty. Liberty and license are close cousins, but they're opposites, right? Freedom ordered toward the good is liberty. Freedom ordered for itself, not toward the good, is license. And so all of these Protestants, even though they rejected virtue ethics, the ethics of the Catholic Church, Aristo-Thomist ethics, they said, no, we need, because they were well studied, we need virtue ethics. We need virtue in the people, or a constitution won't work. And there are more besides, they're all in my book, Catholic Republic. But the idea is that the Protestant founders were borrowing secretly, you might say plagiarizing, the ideas of Christendom, under Charlemagne or even under Constantine, a Catholic structuring of society. The Catholic Church had built Europe. And even though this is west of the pond, they were just drawing on that strong tradition of Western values, even where it contradicted quite starkly their own Protestantism. And so they kind of found ways to make it appear to be compatible with Protestantism. But it wasn't. And at the end of the day, like I said, the biggest betrayal of the American way of life, of Montesquieu, kind of the intellectual headwaters of these guys, was growing the nation even bigger than 13. And the long and the short is, I think that there's only one solution. It's going to be to break it up, balkanize the place, where we can have many meaningful republics where people actually embrace a culture. You can't have a culture unless the people are univocal in their support for it.
You think that would mean breaking it up into different countries, or just different geographical areas, still with a central government, but doing and acting a lot less in our daily lives? You talk about breaking it up?
Yeah, we tried that. I mean, if you read Jefferson and Madison's Kentucky and Virginia resolutions, they had an idea called nullification, where the states, state sovereignty and all that, I don't want to go civil war on everyone, but states can remain sovereign by when the government gives an order. If it violates the government's constitutional purview, just basically ignore it. That doesn't really work. We had robust states' rights for roughly the first 75 years of the country, and then the Civil War happened. After the Civil War, just the central government has ruled everything since the passage of the 14th Amendment in 1868. So yeah, we tried that. We got here, I think, quicker than everyone thought. The big question is, why did, with the typical Republican lifespan, with small r republic, the Swiss cantons, which were a republic that all the framers talked about, they lasted 900 years. The English Republic, which from Magna Carta to 50 years ago was basically a republic, lasted 900 years. The Venetian Republic lasted 700 or 800 years. Little Malta, lasted over 1,000 years. So why is the American Republic, why is it dying? We're in our death throes in its relative teenagehood, maybe adolescence. And the question is because, I argue, because essentially you had these Protestants reading all this Catholic stuff, all of the constitutional structures of all those places I just read were openly Catholic. That doesn't mean a confessional state. It just means the Catholic intellectual tradition heralded the cultural and political structures. We have that, but we hid it. And so in order to make it look Protestant, to appear Protestant, because the people here were all Protestants originally, now they're nothing. Now they're not Protestant or Catholic. They had to make little concessions, and the concessions killed the subsidiarity, the virtue ethics, the natural rights. So the short answer is, yeah, there's no way back at this point. It's kind of the insinuated note in Catholic Republic is balkanization is the only way. In law, we call it ratchet effect. The federal government is so big and so many of the people are so immoral that there's no getting it back. And it was too big to be a republic anyway. As soon as we had that, it was just a matter of time. I
was telling Joe, I said, when that time comes, like I was joking around, I said, okay, but if I have to choose, I want the Catholics to get from Texas east to Florida, because I want warm weather and I want oil. So
right. Well, that's why I came to Mississippi, man. I mean, that's why I came to Mississippi. It's like arguably the most conservative state. I think one of the most beautiful states, because I love the forest. I was sick of living in the American West. Let them have the American West, man. I
said that. Let them have it. Let them have the whole West Coast.
Yeah, but even more on the West Coast. I'm sorry, Arizonans. I have dear friends in Arizona. They're like, it's conservative here, but yeah, but you're surrounded by California, Nevada, and New Mexico, which are like three of the worst places on earth. You know,
where do you get bread, Tim? Where are you going to get Italian bread?
Yeah.
That's my that's my concern.
No, it's true. We'll make it, man. Well, I mean, yeah, you can get it from the South. That's the funny thing about it. We'll take Texas too, because it's still mostly conservative. There are myths. I lived in Texas almost half my life. There are myths going around about Texas, and does have like the 8th biggest economy in the world and all that. But Texans aren't like Stephen F. Austin or Bowie or anything like that anymore. Texans have grown complacent and suburban and comfortable like everyone else. But we'll take them. They're not the real South. They're what we call the Southwest. But we'll take them. Yeah, I think I like other Joe's idea. I think Texas to Florida, I would say give up Arizona as part of that block. It's not just the West Coast. And I mean, give up all that desert. People, go look at a topographical map at home. Just type in U.S. topographical map. It's all brown west of the Continental Divide. I mean, the land. It's all green in the Southeast and even the Northeast, because you get rain and trees and life. Right, but it's all desert out there anyway. Let them have it. The culture of death. They deserve the brown, rainless land. You know, we want the green, life-giving waters of the American South.
So that's what I think. Good. Let's make this happen. So go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say, in your other book, Tim, Rules for Retrogrades: 40 Tactics to Defeat the Radical Left. I loved 3 of the claims that you made in it, and I want to get your views on them. No truth is off limits. We must never be ashamed to be candid. Never trust a man who is unwilling to have enemies. And radicals form coalitions, but retrogrades form fellowships. I want to talk about the middle one first. You said, never trust a man who's unwilling to have enemies. I agree with that. And I'll tell you what, I personally believe this. It is a lack of courage that on the part, particularly of Catholics, particularly of Catholic men, who are afraid to be hated. You see, we are afraid to be hated. We don't want it. We want to go along to get along. And this goes back to what we were talking about in the very beginning of this conversation about the society who go to mass. We're part of the world. We don't want to be hated. And that doesn't mean we should aspire to be hated. But at the same time, we should never be afraid to speak the truth. And if someone doesn't like us because of it, listen, there's nothing I can do about it. My door is open to you, because we have to love people at the end of the day. I mean, God is love. But when we speak the truth, we are loving them. Talk a little bit about that. Splice it up a little bit. I'd be interested in hear what you have to say.
Well, I don't know many men that are willing to be hated the way that even the flawed American founders and framers, and by flawed, I mean Protestant, were willing to. I mean, man, they just pledged their lives, their fortunes, and they had much, and their sacred honor, and they appeared to have much. They put it all on the line, and they took on one of the, to that point, the most powerful empire in human history. From as little colonials, just because they had the one advantage of the gap provided by the Atlantic Ocean. They put it all on the line. They're willing to be hated. It was, hey, if we lose, we're going to be hung. Let's all hang together so we don't hang separately. I don't see any of that fighting spirit in the 2020 quote unquote male. I don't. I see nonstop apology. Well, I don't see it among Christians and conservatives. I guess I see some of it among the radicals. You got to know your enemy, and they do a lot right. As much as this is one of the things I hate the most, the left has stormed the 7 major institutions of Western civilization. They've taken them all. They've made them theirs. They win. They do nothing but win. They're perfectionists. If there's 2 square inches of the cultural landscape they haven't taken, they say, why haven't we taken that? They're hungry, they're tireless, they fight, they know how to fight hard without tampering they go after Trump hard, they go after whoever is in their crosshairs so hard. That's how you do it. That's how you win. So it irritates me to no end to hear Christians or conservatives going, oh, the left's ideas are so, lunatical, which they are. No, but they're such losers. No. We're the losers. We're the losers. Yeah, yes, we're right about precepts because that was handed to us. That's natural law and that's God more than that's us. We happen to have everything to fight for and we gave it all up. So the Christians and conservatives are pathetic. We are losers. We have to get our mind around that. We forfeited God's house to them. The church, the news media, the entertainment media, the academy, from the cradle to the grave, from cradle to grad school anyway. Even sports now are being overtaken by the feminists. Their positions of government and econ are all, Washington, D.C. is like 90% Democrat. All of the admin jobs, all the econ jobs are all culture of deathers. And they did it underneath our very nose. So don't be the kid who's getting 50-pieced in a basketball game and then talks trash to the other team. That's a joke. We're being 50-pieced. And it's all because of the way that Christian and conservatives were brainwashed to being these nice dweebs that never insult anyone, that never fight hard, that always extend the olive branch at the wrong time. There's a time to do it. It's not now. It hasn't been for a long time. When you go to war, you go Roman. And it's out of cowardice. It's all out of softness in the middle. It's just like, you got to fight. That's just what it is to be a Christian and allegedly a conservator of Western civilization, which is just, to repeat, a Christian. It's just cowardice. Mm-hmm. You go fight. Men nowadays, even if they could win a war, which they can't because they can't fire a gun or throw a punch, they wouldn't anyway because they're like, well, as I'm killing the guy, he wouldn't like me. If you're a man, you have enemies. Just like if you're a man and you're a good man, you should have some friends. You don't need a million friends, but you should have some true friends. You're going to have enemies as certainly as you have friends. If you guys can't count your enemies out there, if you're like, yeah, well, I made this enemy on that day, taking this stand, then you shouldn't be able to look yourselves in the mirror.
I particularly like one of the things. Oh, I'm sorry, Joe. I particularly like one of the things.
You can't get anything done if you don't take a side in life. People aren't willing to take the side. Because Tim, I'll be honest with you. It comes down to this. We live a comfortable life. I know a lot of people who make money. They have comfortable lives. They send their kids to good schools. They live in nice towns. To do what you're talking about requires sacrifice. You see, there is a courage aspect to it, and I agree with you. But there's also an aspect of, if I do what you just said, I'm not going to have a comfortable life. And
well, that's the courage.
I'm not willing to do that.
And your friends, I tell you, they don't send their kids to good school. They send their kids to crappy schools that they pay a lot of money
for, right?
No, but they're achieving schools. We all went to them. I know, trust me, I didn't know the school you went to, but I live in an area, Don Bosco Prep, St. Peter's Prep. They're rated in football top 10 in the nation, Bergen Catholic.
Right, but they're crappy schools.
Oh, I get it. I totally hear you. Trust me. I know what you're talking about with regard to forming someone, because I'll be truthful with you. As a father, if I don't get my kids to heaven, I fail. I don't care if they become...
Or teach them anything in Western. So they also just teach them nonsense in the school. That kids aren't diagramming sentences, learning Latin, learning whatever. Look, saying this makes it easier to pull the cowards out of the matrix, where it's like, I know that it's hard to say no to a good steak. Remember that scene with the character Cypher where he's like, I'm going to stay in the Matrix because even though I know this steak is fake, in my mind, it tastes so good. Right. But to be like, but it's fake. It's not a real steak anyway. It's nothing. That's the matrix of American comfort in the American suburb. It's nothing anyway. The schools are crappy. They're run by illiterates who have, some women's studies major or some education major or whatever anyway. The suburbs don't mean anything. The comfort is hard to get away from because that's what cowards love most. That's why cowards are all soft. That's our first descriptor of cowards. They're soft because they don't ever do any resistance training, which makes you hard. But that, you know, you're not living as an honorable man with well-earned comfort. So even the comforts are comfort upon comfort upon comfort is not comfort. Mm-hmm. It's resplendence. It is what makes soft. You don't, like when you work really hard, a hard week's work, your weekend means something. When you have, you know, vacation upon vacation upon vacation, it means less, and it even stands for less. So the reason to emphasize this is to help the people to awake them from their dogmatic, comfortable slumbers. Mm-hmm. We could say, look, I know this might be hard if you make it all sound good, but it's not good anyway. What you should have at the end of the day, what you should be attached to, the natural virtue more than anything, is your honor. And we are luxuriating at the expense of not only the Republic, but our families and ourselves as well. We're not real men. We have to be willing to have conflict. That's what makes us men.
Tim, I just want to say, like, I agree with what you're saying. Absolutely. Like, what makes me think what you're saying is John the Baptist. John the Baptist rejected comfort. He went into the wilderness. He ate basic food. He did not have comfortable clothes. I'd also bet if we saw John the Baptist, he was a strong person. He had to live on his strength.
Of course.
And I agree with you 100%. But like I said, the circles that I know and people that I know, it's a tough sell. Because at the end of the day, people, what's it saying? People like their toys. People like their comforts. I like my big house. I'm not having kids because I like to go on that nice vacation. I agree with you, by the way, to be truthful with you. I live in a box, in plain English. I mean, I got 4 kids, and frankly, I don't even know how the hell I'm going to educate them. But at the same time, I know, because I have friends on both ends of it, it's a tough sell. A lot of people will look at me and they'll be like, you're a sucker. You're a sucker because you have a few brains in your head and you could make money, and you're a sucker. And that's what people will say. Joe, you wasted your life.
So I want to piggyback on that, because I think what's important to say here, yes, I think you're both right that there are many men, let's keep it with men, men like that. I think also, and I say this from, you know, it's anecdotal. I mean, it's just, you know, like it's my own experiences, and, you know, going into the city and working, and people who actually think I have something to say and they ask me questions. People do respond, though, if somebody was to take the reins. And what I mean by that is what you're doing, Tim, what we're doing, what we're trying to do, what many others are doing out there, by opening our mouths in the midst of all this. I mean, Joe and I say all the time, Tim, and we used you as an example on one of our shows, that, you know, you put it on the line, you lost your job. Okay. We can lose our jobs. Joe and I are working men. We're blue collar guys. Okay. I work in a restaurant. Joe works in a bank. People, men in particular, I think would respond to that. The more the voices grow to speak for the truth, like you mentioned, no truth is off limits. The more people speak the truth and speak it boldly, I think you get a response where somebody might be a little, not that they're cowards, but sometimes people need to see action on other people's parts, and they will follow because they know it's right. And maybe they need to see somebody else storming the hill, for lack of a better analogy, like somebody's charging the hill, and then they will charge with them. I think that's why what we're doing is, look, some people you're not going to get to. The guys that you and Joe are talking about, they're too into their comfort. We pray for them. We hope that they see the light, and they live that life. But there's many people who are just waiting for somebody to open their mouth in a chorus of voices that are screaming the truth from the rooftop, that this culture is rotten, that there's problems in America, that souls are being lost, that we have to fight against this, that we have to resist it. I think there's a lot of people out there. I'm saying anecdotally, I've experienced myself as a 52-year-old man where I'm working with a young barback, and because somebody just had a conversation about gay marriage, and so I was keeping my mouth shut, said, hey, Joe, are you for gay marriage? And I say, no. And that's where the conversation ends. But I know that dude was thinking in his mind, man, this guy's got balls. Not that I do, but you know what I'm trying to say, where I could say, no, I don't believe in all this nonsense. But I do want to segue from that, if you don't mind, Tim, into coalitions and fellowships. Because when I read Rules for Retrogrades, that was one of the things that stuck out in my mind more than anything. Now, we know because we know the left, okay, if they gain any real power, their coalition is going to fall apart and it's going to devolve into a civil war, because we read history. We saw what happened in the Soviet Union. They get the power and they all start killing each other. What is the difference between a fellowship and a coalition in America, assuming, of course, we don't break it up into countries right now and it's still America? What would a fellowship look like here as opposed to their coalition?
Well, fellowships are just friendships united in virtue. And that's what I was talking about earlier. When a republic, a res publica, needs to be small enough for, if in theory, if not in actuality, everyone in the res publica would be the kind of dude that would hang out together. That so where that if chance meetings are at a much higher rate than in a non-republic like ours, we don't live in a real republic. At a much higher rate, you know, if there's a countryman of yours, he's like a kinsman of yours. This is a real republic where it's like Braveheart in the you know, the little hilltop villages of Scotland. This is what a republic is. So they're built out of, Aristotle describes 3 types of friendship. 2 are false. The lowest are friendships of pleasure. The lowest are friendships of utility, where you just want someone for the ping pong table. The next lowest are friendships of pleasure, where you actually kind of enjoy the person, but you don't will the good for them and you're not becoming virtuous again. And then true friendships, where you will the good for the other person and you genuinely admire the other person and you're both making each other more virtuous. So virtuous at the center of true friendships. That's a republic where men care about the same thing. The one true religion, Roman Catholicism, unites you. It motivates every natural or supernatural act you take in your life, every natural or supernatural virtue you cultivate. That's the point, even if it's not a confessional state per se. So it's just a league of friends, as kind of corny and gay as that sounds. A republic is a league of friends where if you have a little West Virginia-sized republic and you run into a dude because you had to run an errand on the other end of the republic, you know, you drive 2 hours, you run into a random guy, you know, in a true republic, this guy's like me. This guy hates feminism. He hates the LGBTQ agenda. He loves Jesus. He loves the sacraments. You have it's a start point, right? And so you don't have to begin conversations like, do you believe that men have penises? You know, which is where we're at now in our own republic. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that a man can have a baby? There's nothing I have to say to that guy. All I have for that guy is an eventual fist for his face. You know, the guy where I'd have to begin a conversation like that. We're not Republican countrymen. Me and someone that I'd have to say, do you believe men have penis? If we talk, we're just gonna fight and I'm gonna knock him out. But I mean, like, that's not what it is in a true republic. This is a guy that loves basically everything I love, and his little calling card, his little, you know, membership card to the Republic of West Virginia, that says as much, because there's a res publica. And it would be a true friendship that would spring up as between he and I, as between him and me, I should say. And that's what a republic is. It's just moral friendships writ large. The left manages, because they're able to circumvent the rules, the moral rules. They're efficient cheaters at this rule. They do form very effective, very highly efficient coalitions where they allow certain breaches of the rules, you know, and they don't have purity spiral issues. If they're like, okay, they're kind of doing it to J.K. Rowling now, like, oh, you don't believe in trannies. I can't really tell where they allow breaches of the rules, but because they're not all virtuous true friends, they'll cover for the feminists and the Islamists at once, who are on like the opposite end of the spectrum, you know? So that works for them because they're anti-Christian ideologically in their inception. They're anti-Christian. So you can get away with bending the rules when you believe in anti-Christian bending of the rules. They do that very efficiently. We can't do that. We can't form coalitions. It just has to be, we need to start from the beginning, send guys from our midst, you know, the moderates and all that. It's like, look, that time has passed. You need to pick a side. This is the side of Christianity versus. It's Christianity versus, and here's real Christianity. And then you can't even begin there. That's a big enough task. But you actually have to say, okay, and here are the real Christian rules. The patriarchy, right? That's what Christianity was called for 1900 years, because you have an ecclesial patriarchy, you have a household patriarchy. Both of the two vocations are patriarchal. Deal with it. If you don't like it, you can break it down. You can read some books and get educated. Oh, there is no debating this. But abortion, obviously, it's a non-starter. Contraception is a non-starter. Porn, it's a non-starter. If you want a happy life and you're a good dude, get on board or get on the other side. There's no room for that. And if once you cold your masses that way, all those dudes are going to be your friends, right? You're self-selecting out. And that's how you have a republic of friends, a league of friends. That sounds a lot lamer than how I termed it in the book.
I wonder if they gained any, Joe and I have spoken about it on the show. I wonder if they gained any real power, what's going to happen, because you mentioned J.K. Rowling. I mean, you're seeing, I mean, I wish people would open their eyes, Tim. It's like, you always, like, especially what you're saying about coalitions. Their coalition, once they gain power, if God forbid they did, cannot last. The feminists cannot accommodate the transgender crowd. We're seeing that in the case in Connecticut, with the feminists are like J.K. Rowling on the side of the girls' track team, and the trans crowd is on the side of the boys who think they're girls. Like you said, you have Muslims who detest homosexuals and want to throw them off buildings in bed with the LGBT crowd. It can't last. If they gained any kind of real power, they're going to have to fight it out amongst themselves. We'll all be dead, but they'd have to fight it out amongst themselves.
They do. Look at Trotsky. I mean, look at the way that the apparatchiks of the Soviet Union worked. But so that is the case. At the end of the day, everyone loses his head, right, when the leftists win out. But since this is kind of the final step of the socialists taking power in America, using the means of feminism and race baiting, they just always use whatever's near at hand. Feminism's been too close to the American heart for 120 years. So has the race baiting for about 120 years. So the Marxists just always use what tools are nearby as weapons, and they're really effective at it. And they make coalitions when they're acquiring and gathering that power. Once it's gathered, then it's just constant gang boss serial murder. Which is what you have with Trotsky and Lenin and all that. Right. Yeah, that's why those coalitions don't ultimately work, but they do work. But we don't care about that, because, like you said, we'll be dead. We just want to win over them, and it's all armed now. So now to take it back to the last point, the comfortable suburbanite is realizing they're coming out by their own admission to the suburbs. So yeah, I know you're a 40-year-old man and you've never thrown a punch. That's pathetic, but that's another conversation. Learn to throw a punch, definitely learn to fire a gun, because it's coming.
You're talking basically about like building your house on a solid foundation. Very, very Catholic idea. And I want to just switch gears for a moment. Clearly, Donald Trump is not a virtuous man in many respects. Okay. And, he's not perfect. He's not supposed to be perfect. He's not my priest. But a lot of people will say this, a lot of Catholics will say this: I can't support a person who is as flawed as Donald Trump. What would you say to that person?
I don't really know what they mean. I mean, I'm not saying he's perfect. I think he's very virtuous. He's got a lot of the virtues that I've described here today. So he's very virtuous. He tends to be like Constantine or Charlemagne, more like, this might be overstating it. I don't think he's at their level of virtue, but I think he's a high level of virtue. He also has a high level of vice, but you wouldn't say he's not virtuous. He's much more virtuous than all these sluggards in the suburbs who are. He doesn't have any mediocrity to him. He's made some big mistakes in his life, which I think now he's at the point he might tell you. I don't know, but he's got a lot of virtue. I mean, a lot of courage, a lot of what Aristotle calls magnanimity. Look at that one up. A lot of what Aristotle calls magnificence, tons of fortitude. Tons of phronesis, which is prudence. He's a good fighter. So I would just tell them I don't know what they mean. But yes, he's not perfect, but neither. Who, Obama? Bathhouse Berries? What are they talking about? They're just brainwashed morons. He's got lots of virtue. He has lots of vice as well.
I like his fight. I like the fact that the thing that pisses them off more than anything else is something that I've been saying long before the front line with Joe and Joe, long before I knew Joe. I said, when is the right going to get in the gutter with the left and start throwing some punches?
Right.
That's what I said. That's what I said. It's like, why is it? It's always, I go back to John McCain as always my perfect example. Before 2008, he was the maverick. He was the one who went against his party. We respect him so much. John McCain. And then as soon as he ran against Barry Obama, he became Hitler. They called him a racist. They called him a fascist. They called him all these things. I was like, when are you people going to learn? You got to get in the gutter with them and you got to throw some punches because they're going to show no mercy to you. And the thing they hate about Trump more than anything else, well, he's got a flawed character or this, that. No, you just don't like the fact that he throws a better punch than you. And he lands them. He lands those punches.
Yeah, what you just said that's great, which is what I was trying to say, Joe, is that I mean, none of our politicians, like, ever have been paragons of the Christian supernatural virtues. So it's fallacious to even bring that up. But so it's a virtue vice. I mean, it's the American populace. We kill babies, and it's illegal to make killing babies illegal. It's illegal to make it illegal in all 50 states. Who are we to judge? I mean, we're a murderous nation. You know, we're murdering our young. So what? And yet I call the phenomenon thin skin, strong stomach. It's how the left works. Very thin skin, but strong stomach. They'll tolerate homosexual acts, one of the few sins that cries out to heaven for justice. Now in California, they're lessening the punishment for man on boy molestation. Forget all those. Even those are not as good as we think it's good that mothers are murderesses, killing their babies. What? Right? So then they're going to get preachy about Trump making fun of someone, calling him a whatever. I don't even know which, some childish name. It's like, no, that's just funny. He's just calling people like, oh, that's so gay. People will get on that. Like, what do you mean? I'm like, I mean, gross, an abomination before nature, something that's vile. Are you trying to back me off? And that's what Trump does, except unlike me, he's important. He's played a real role in changing world history. And he talks how I talk. People are surprised that I talk how I talk because I'm talking to 10,000 or 20,000. He's talking to 100 million or 200 million, and he talks like me. I say that's a virtue. Maybe it's just me.
Well, I think that's his appeal. I mean, he tapped into something. He's, how does a playboy from New York City who's a billionaire relate to a common person? And he does very well. That's a very rare trait in people. He's highly intelligent. Right. He's wealthy beyond comprehension, yet he can go to Lake Charles, Louisiana and talk to some guy in the Cajun Navy and have a great conversation.
Because he's tough. Men like toughness.
Rare person.
It's the first thing we like. We're also buying. Money doesn't make you soft. This is something you were saying, Joe, last. Money doesn't make you soft as long as you're willing to spend it and use it up and risk it. That's what in Max Weber's principle. What is it? The spirit of capitalism, spirit of Protestant work ethic. He says the truly Catholic position that the Protestants never got about wealth. Protestants, like, they get the wealth and they hoard it. That's what's wrong about the idea of Protestant capitalism. Catholic capitalism is work hard, get lots of money, just don't let it rule you. There's this guy Baxter, medieval economist, and he says that wealth should be worn like a light cloak, lest it become an iron cage. If you get wealthy, just be like Donald Trump. Be willing to give up your salary or to risk your salary. And I'm just, look what happened to me. I lost my job, came here. I'm doing fine. And it's just, you have to have trust that the wealth doesn't matter. I've lived poor in law school where we are literally waiting with 2 kids. we were eating, cereal 3 times a day because we were waiting for the student loan disbursement to come out, and it took an extra 2 weeks. So we were eating ramen as 28, 29-year-old. And I've had times that were fat. I really have. Just as long as you don't let the wealth make you into a weenie, then it's good. And that's what men like. Toughness first. That's the main thing. It doesn't mean it's the most important virtue for getting you to heaven, but in terms of what men relate to, men like toughness first. And so why do men like Trump? Because he's virtuous in the ways that are relevant to men. He's not virtuous in all the ways, but he's virtuous in the way that matters to us. We like toughness first, and it shouldn't be a surprise. His wealth didn't make him a wimp. That's all.
I'll tell you, a lot of people also say that he's fake. You see, I would disagree with that as well. What would you say to that person if someone said, he's just fake? He's a con man. This is what people say too. He's a con man. He's just trying to get power. What would you say to that?
They're wrong.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that's self-evidently wrong. Con men do what John McCain did, or George Bush Jr. or Sr. did, or Obama pretending at first that he wasn't a socialist, or Hillary Clinton or Bill Clinton, who Bill Clinton at one point said the age of big government is over, and he just goes with the wind. It's everyone, almost everyone else, arguably in our political generation, aside from arguably Reagan and Trump, we're con men. I can't think of it. Maybe like Barry Goldwater was an earlier politician who wasn't a con man. Ron Paul, not a con man. Mm-hmm. I don't agree with everything he says, but he's his son Rand Paul, not a con man. But Trump, no, that's patently, self-evidently false. He's anything but a con man. Just like he's anything but weak. It's funny because
people will label that because of the things you said. They'll say he's basically, divisive. And I would disagree with that as well, because you have to be divisive. When something is wrong, you have to speak up against it. They just want someone to go along. That's it. They want politicians. I call them institutional men. George Bush being one of them.
Mitt Romney.
Roberts being another. I will not make the boat rock. I won't do it. You see, Donald doesn't care. You see, that's the type of leader you need.
Well, that's all we're talking about. He's a retrograde. Yeah, he's definitely divisive. These people are so illiterate. They're listing catalogs of traits that I guess ostensibly negative traits that contradict one another. They're like, he's overly strong, but he's also a phony. But overly strong people aren't phony. Maybe he's really, really strong, and he wins at all costs, like Johnny from, Karate Kid or something. But he's not weak. You can't say he's strong and he's weak in a way, or he just tells it how it is. And he doesn't care about people's feelings. But he's also a phony. These are illiterates. We have an illiterate culture. And it's a lot of the Christians as well. They're cucks. They just say stuff because they heard it on the news. It doesn't even make sense. CNN, which I've been forced to watch since I started lifting weights at the gym here in Hattiesburg again. They literally, when I'm doing one of my exercises in one corner of the gym, I actually am kind of forced to watch CNN, and they literally will say these things, like one segment, the next segment. They'll accuse them of being too strong and of being phony at the same time. And the moron Christians, sometimes you note it after mass over donuts. They're literally you're like, that's a talking point I heard from like New York Times or Washington Post. What is the matter with you? Your brain's like a wet noodle and you're reading all the wrong stuff anyway. If you're going to be just a brainless drone, then only read, super right-wing stuff. I would say only read right-wing stuff, and then don't be a brainless drone, because you might have plenty to critique there too. I find plenty on the Catholic right to critique. But if you're gonna do that, if you're gonna just turn the brain onto auto drive, then stop reading The Gray Lady and stop watching CNN.
Yeah, I hear you. All right, Joe, any final thoughts?
No. Tim, where could everyone reach you? Tell us a little bit about what you're doing with your new website, and I think it'll be a good place to end this conversation.
Yeah, timothyjgordon.com is the site that I brought up right around the time I got fired in early June 3rd. People were incredibly giving. They really helped me out, through donations. You can still give those on the website. And they enrolled in my online classes, Aristotle's Ethics, Church History, and Catholic Republic course. Only the latter has a lot of spots. We're about full on the Church History course, great course, and Aristotle's Ethics course, probably the most important one people could take in their lives on the Nicomachean Ethics. So they've been amazing. In my YouTube channel is Timothy Gordon. The rule, and the newest book, until No Christian Feminism comes out anyway, is called Rules for Retrogrades. And, you can type that in as YouTube search bar as well. So Rules for Retrogrades is the podcast and the book. I wrote Catholic Republic before that. No Christian Feminism will be out in January. And my website is Timothy J. Gordon, where you can enroll or donate or whatever you want to do. Thank you guys so much for bringing me on.
No, absolutely, Tim. We thank you for coming on, and hopefully, you become a friend of the show, and we can have you back, particularly when your new book comes out. Hopefully before then, maybe we can mix it up a little bit more. Out of curiosity, I know that at one point with your with the GoFundMe campaign, there was a threat that maybe GoFundMe would take that down. Did that actually happen?
They tried. We bullied them. I got some of the best lawyers around. We bullied them. They gave up the money, but we did switch to DonorBox, which, if any of you find yourself in hard times, use DonorBox, not GoFundMe. And we switched to DonorBox like the second and a half day out. We got so much money at GoFundMe the first 36 hours. We knew we might have to fight for that. We knew we might lose all of that. We ended up getting it, and we switched to DonorBox, which is better anyway. What people should do, because losing your job, you all have to get your minds around this very last thought. It's not a big deal, right? You lose your job. Behold the fowls of the air, said Christ, and look at them. They're so much less worried about where their next meal is coming from, and the Lord loves us that much more than them. No one starves in America. One idea I had is, get 10 of your friends or family, come up with a pledge. You can even write it out and just say, look, the Marxist purge has come. It's here. If any of us lose our jobs, we all sign a little thing. It doesn't have to be notarized or anything. Just saying 10 of us, we are going to give to one another, to whoever loses their job here, X $100 a month, whether, decide what you need to be comfortable. 150 or 200. What's that? 150 or $200 a month in the event that any of these 10 people, it's a little friend insurance, and we'll give it for 9 months or 12 months or whatever you need. And right. Then who wouldn't pay that? And it's a little insurance policy, right?
It's Catholic unemployment.
It's Catholic unemployment. And you can take that and not pay it back. And, it's good. It's good to click refresh. The one thing we've learned that the other generations didn't know is changing careers is good for you. It forces you to build other muscles that you didn't even know you had. Mm-hmm. And so that's part of the cuckery of Americanism. Old Americanism is getting in one career and you're just there and you think you're dead if you're not making $100,000 a year anymore. Build a new muscle, get a new career. A lot of people explode with success after they do that anyway. And certainly don't be cucked into silence, anyone. And if you have this little plan, you could do it within the week. Think of 9 other good people and just say, hey, can you guys afford $200 a week so that we don't have to be silenced? You shouldn't allow yourself to be silenced anyway. You should be a man of principle. But this makes it easy and easier to be principled. All of us, 10 of us, we're not all going to lose our jobs. We pledge $200 a month for 9 or 12 months to whoever loses their job. And it's my best friends or brothers or whatever. And all of us can afford $200 a month if this happens. And then we're not going to have to be quiet around the water cooler, because that's how the enemy operates and wins.
I love it.
That's great advice.
Great idea.
That's very interesting.
And our message, Tim, I'm going to steal a line from you and then we're going to go. Okay. This is Tim, Joe, and Joe telling the left, you and your friends against me and my friends. Let's get it on. It's one of the things, Tim, that really made me start to watch it. Promos actually do a really good job of bringing an audience. Because when I heard you say that, I was like, that's exactly the attitude we have to have. You and your
thanks for telling me.
It's me and my friends. Let's get it on. And having said that, thanks for joining us at the front line with Joe and Joe. Especially thanks to Tim Gordon for coming on and mixing it up here. You can follow Joe and I on Facebook and YouTube at The Frontline with Joe and Joe. Like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff. Until we meet again, remember that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation, it's going on everywhere. We'll see you next time.